Mount Celeste is a real mountain in British Columbia, Canada. It's nestled smack dab in the middle of Vancouver Island, with a prominence of 589 meters and an elevation of 2,041 meters. It's also the primary setting for the video game Celeste. Mind you, in the game it is quite a bit taller, clocking in at over 3,000 meters. Celeste began its development all the way back in 2016 as what is now known as Celeste Classic. It's basically a proof-of-concept prototype of the game, which was developed for the Pico 8 Virtual Console during a 4-day-long game jam. Celeste Classic is still playable, by the way, over on itch.io, and you can find a link in the description. Celeste Classic also exists as a playable minigame inside the final version of Celeste, although it was recreated using C# for that appearance. Development of the game we now know as Celeste began shortly after the success of Celeste Classic at that fateful game jam, releasing only 2 years later on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Windows, macOS, and Linux on January 25th, 2018. The game also received support in the form of a free update that added a bonus 9th chapter at the end of the game in September 2019, as well as a release on Google Stadia on July 28th, 2020. The plot of the game follows a young woman named Madeline. She's decided to leave home and climb Mount Celeste as an attempt to conquer her anxieties and depression. Along the way, she forms new relationships with the people she meets during her journey and gets a little bit more than she bargained for on the mental health side of things. The story of Celeste is told through occasional conversations with other characters and is presented through text boxes. These text boxes, which often apply animations to some words for emphasis, are accompanied by expressive character portraits and basic beep speech that really nails down the tone of voice that the characters are speaking with. Accompany that with the game's brilliantly emotional soundtrack, and it's really no wonder that the emotions the characters have are broadcasted so clearly. Madeline's story is extremely relatable, and I believe it would hit close to home for a lot of people. It's a journey of self-discovery and a symbolic show of emotion. She struggles a lot on her way up the mountain, and she learns a lot about herself. The feelings she grapples with are difficult and really not easy to come to terms with. But they're feelings that many people experience for themselves every single day. Celeste goes above and beyond in its symbolic representation of anxiety, depression, self-doubt. Madeline is not the first character to experience these things, and she definitely won't be the last, but her story is compelling, and it's touching. I resonated with Madeline, I relate to her struggles, and I felt every ounce of emotion that the characters portrayed. As far as gameplay goes, Celeste is really quite simple. There's not much that Madeline can really do. She can move, jump, dash, and climb, and that is literally it. That's everything. All you need is 3 buttons and a joystick, or a D-pad if you're so inclined. The tutorial for the game also feels extremely non-intrusive, and honestly, pretty immersive. It only takes a couple of seconds of your time, and when I went through it for the first time, I was kinda stunned. Instead of just putting you in front of a gap that you had to dash over and telling you which button to push, this happened. You can do this. The thing about these controls is that they may be simple, but they feel really good, and that's no accident. The developers of Celeste put so much time and effort into really nailing down the feeling of this control scheme. And I mean it. They put a lot of thought into this thing. Matt, or Matty Thorson, one of the developers of the game, actually detailed a lot of the techniques they used to make the game feel way better without the player noticing. That alone deserves praise, in my opinion. Being open about these sorts of details to fans or the public in general opens the doors to more education and experimentation from other developers as well. Mind you, the developers of Celeste never really invented any of these things on their own, but they did detail them, which is important. Now, I actually take a huge interest in game development in general. I actually studied it myself in university, or at least the technical software and programming design part of it. So stuff like this really matters a lot to me. And in case you're not familiar with some of the things that developers do to make games feel better, especially without players noticing, I'd like to detail what it is that Celeste in particular does to make that happen. The first technique is one that is colloquially known as Coyote Time, which gets its name from Looney Tunes' own Wile E. Coyote. This is a period of time after your character has already left the edge of a platform when you can still jump. This gives players a couple of extra frames or milliseconds of breathing room to jump when they're about to cross a gap. You might not think this is a big deal, but this is one technique that I think is really important to include in basically any game that has platforming, and I've been lucky, or unlucky, enough to see the effects of what happens when a game does have this feature versus when it suddenly doesn't. Back in late 2012 or early 2013, I don't remember specifically which, the MMO Guild Wars 2 had a patch that accidentally removed Coyote Time from the game. I was an avid player of Guild Wars 2 at the time, and one of my favorite parts of the game are the jumping puzzles. And when they removed Coyote Time, it was catastrophic. You see, a big selling point for Guild Wars 2 now, and especially at the time, were the jumping puzzles and other platforming challenges. When Coyote Time got removed, it basically made those challenges impossible to complete. It totally broke the game. There was immediate outcry from players and swift developer response. After only an hour or two of struggling, ArenaNet had already patched it back up and fixed the issue. That's just how important some of these techniques are. They will make or break a game. Take some of these other examples for instance. Jump buffering. If you press and hold the jump button for a short time before landing, you will jump on the exact frame that you land. This is important because oftentimes players will try to line up a button push so they can jump as soon as they land. But if a game doesn't use this technique, then if they're even just a little bit early, they won't jump and it'll feel like the game just missed their input. It can be super frustrating. The next technique is something that Celeste developers call halved gravity jump peak, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just call it hang time. If you press and hold the jump button, your time in the air after a jump will last longer. A lot of games will implement this feature differently than how Celeste does it. For example, in Mario, holding the jump button will make you jump higher. In Celeste, the peak of your jump will last longer. This is hard to notice when you're playing and in recordings, even when it's slowed down, but Madeline will sort of hover at the top of her jump for just a little bit longer in order to make it easier to line up your landing. The fourth technique the developers use is what we're going to call corner correction. Corner correction is when the character's position is modified advantageously in order to maintain the player's intended movement. Ideally, you won't ever notice this while you're actually playing the game, but in Celeste, this is present in a few different ways. First, if you jump and bonk your head on a corner, the game will sort of move you to the side so you keep moving up next to the wall instead of stopping completely. Second, if you dash into a corner of a platform, it'll bump you up just enough for you to land on it. And finally, if you dash sideways through a semi-solid platform, it'll just put you on top. The last technique I want to talk about here is lift momentum storage. When a player jumps from a moving platform, it adds the platform's momentum to their jump speed. In Celeste, when a platform stops moving, you still have a couple of frames, or milliseconds, to jump and take advantage of the momentum. In other words, the platform's momentum is stored for a short amount of time. This is very much like Coyote Time in that it gives players just a tiny bit more time to react, which is what all of these techniques aim to do. Celeste also fudges the numbers a bit in the player's favor in a few other ways, such as letting them jump off of a wall even if they're a few pixels away, and refunding stamina if they cancel an upward wall jump halfway through. All of these things are very small when you consider them at the scale of an entire game, but they all work together in minor ways to culminate in something that feels brilliant to control. Not only that, but these techniques work very well in tandem with another feature that really opens the door for accessibility. At first glance, Celeste is very much not an accessible game. The controls feel very tight, the gameplay challenges are extremely difficult, especially if you go for the optional collectibles, and it's pretty obvious right from the get-go that this game is designed for speedrunning. The obstacles the player is presented with and the complexity of movement that is possible with the controls allows for a lot of interesting gameplay, especially for those looking to speedrun a game competitively. Hell, it's even got a speedrun timer in the options menu. If you like speedrunning, this could be the game for you. If you're like me and not into the speedrunning scene, there's no need to worry. You definitely don't need to get into it that hard to enjoy the game. I personally really enjoyed the challenge at the levels and figuring out how to get around to things like collectibles at my own pace. Now, that might not hold true for everyone. Some people may not enjoy the difficulty that comes with collecting certain things in the game. Some may not even enjoy the challenge of making it to the end of the level in order to experience the story. And that's fine. The developers thought about you too. Celeste has a wonderful accessibility feature called Assist Mode. Now, if you're a fan of other platformers or Nintendo, you might recognize this feature because a similar one is present in Super Mario Odyssey. The Assist Mode in Celeste, well, you know what? The developers explain it super well in-game, so let me just read that for you real quick. Assist Mode allows you to modify the game's rules to fit your specific needs. This includes options such as slowing the game speed, granting yourself invincibility or infinite stamina, and skipping chapters entirely. Celeste is intended to be a challenging and rewarding experience. If the default game proves inaccessible to you, we hope that you can still find that experience with Assist Mode. This explains the intentions incredibly well. The developers don't necessarily want you to play with Assist Mode because they do believe the difficulty is essential to the game. But if that difficulty is what is preventing you from enjoying the game, they want to give you the tools you need to overcome that. So, if the difficulty is something that might scare you away from a game like this, I hope that helps. The level design is also great. It's clear that each and every screen in a chapter has had tons of thought put into it. Difficulty progression is smooth. As you move through a chapter, the challenge slowly ramps up, but at a rate that feels natural. And almost every challenge is presented to the player on a single screen. That means no leaps of faith, no solving sections of a single challenge at a time. The player almost always has all the tools they need to solve a challenge right there in front of them. Even when a particular platforming challenge does stretch past the confines of the screen, there's usually a little set of binoculars right at the entrance, which can be used to view the challenge before you attempt it. The exceptions to this rule are almost always challenges that involve moving platforms or chase sequences. The moving platforms, by the way, are one of the chapter unique mechanics. Celeste does something that's common in a lot of platformers, which is to introduce new game mechanics every chapter. These typically involve challenges that you only have to face during that part of the game. It also helps mix things up and keep gameplay from getting stale while giving you new problems to solve. On top of that, it grants an incredible feeling of satisfaction when all of these new mechanics are brought back for the game's final climax. These mechanics don't typically break the formula of the game. You're still platforming, but Celeste does have a couple of very short segments that do break the formula of the game, and honestly, they were the only thing that took me out of the experience. As an example, there is a story moment in the game where Theo, who is Madeline's acquaintance that she met on the mountain, is teaching her a new breathing exercise because she's having a panic attack. He tells Madeline to imagine a feather floating in front of her and that her breathing keeps it aloft. This happens in the middle of a story moment. There's just text before and after this. You're basically just reading at this point. But your breath is controlled by the A button. I don't feel like the game clearly communicated that I was in control of this, and I didn't really assume I was because the characters were in the middle of a conversation. I didn't really get stuck here. I kind of just stared at the screen for like 10 seconds, and then I pressed the A button to see if it would advance the conversation, and you know, I figured it out, but like, yeah, it felt out of place. This also happens later in the game with a different setup and a different context, and it's really no big deal, but yeah, I don't know, it just felt weird. There are also a lot of optional collectibles in the game that require you to solve different types of challenges in order to collect. My favorite of them are the berries, which happen to be the most common. They typically use the chapter mechanics to make some kind of cool skill challenge or a sort of puzzle where you have to figure out which route to take around a level in order to get the berry and make it back to a platform. There's also a variant on these where the berries have wings, and those ones you typically have to collect without dashing, which is harder than it sounds. These are all purely optional, and the amount you collect during your playthrough will award you with a couple of lines of changed dialogue and an alternative piece of art at the end of the game, so I wouldn't stress out too much if you have trouble collecting some. Next, there are these audio cassettes. The challenges you face in collecting these always involve some timed platforms which will disappear and reappear to the beat of the background music. Collecting these will unlock B-side and C-sides of the levels you collect them in, which are just harder versions of the same level. Finally, there are crystal hearts. The challenges to collect these vary wildly, from solving puzzles to memorization to recognizing references to classic platformers like Super Mario Bros. 3. These are used to unlock the 2 post-game chapters as well as the first one's B and C sides. Speaking of which, there are 2 post-game chapters which add a lot more challenging content to the game. If you want to play the first one, you'll only need 4 crystal hearts, and if you want to play all the way through the last one, you'll need to collect 15, although the B and C sides of the first one require all of the crystal hearts. All in all, Celeste was astounding. The game was challenging, it was difficult, but it was never frustrating, and the story had so much emotion behind it that it kind of blew me out of the water. I don't remember exactly what I expected going into this game, but whatever it was, it paled in comparison to what I actually got. Celeste is an incredible game, and I recommend it to anybody who likes emotional stories or just 2D platformers. I need more of this kind of stuff in my life. Hey guys, thanks again for watching as long as you have. It really means the world to me. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you want to see next. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified next time I post a video. Thanks again. You guys rock.